Hey everyone, it's Greg. It's a new edition of Unbreakable Spirits. Thanks for watching today. We have a lot to talk about. I haven't done a new episode in a little bit, so it should be a fun time. Sit back and just enjoy the program with me. So I got to tell you, yesterday I had a checkup down at the hospital there in Philadelphia, University of Pennsylvania, and everything went well. But it's funny, every time I go down there, now I'm amazed because I learned something new every time I go down. First of all, my doctor, Dr. Kalish, is a really excellent doctor. She knows more about brittle bones and how to treat brittle bones than anyone I've ever met in my life. And that includes all my old doctors and doctor I grew up with, who I write about in my book. She's just a brilliant, brilliant doctor. And so what's funny is that, you know, most of the doctors, I guess I had maybe about 6 or 7 doctors now for different things, cardiology, pain management, the doctor for my brittle bones, so on and so forth. And most of them are pretty young. Most of them are half my age. Well, maybe not half my age, but young, very young people, which is good. They're fresh out of medical school. They know the latest things going on, Back in the day, it used to be, oh, you get an older doctor, he or she is experienced. Not anymore, It's 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 pretty eye-opening, I mean, not only the doctors, but you go down and the buildings are all bright and cheerful, bright colors and windows, glass and brightness and sunshine coming in. Much different than when I was growing up. When I went to the old Children's Hospital on Bainbridge Street in Philadelphia, uh, it used to be a dark gray building that looked sort of like a castle, like a mausoleum kind of thing. It was just stone and just, I don't know, it wasn't very cheery. You didn't get very, very good thoughts even before you went into the building. But nowadays, everything's different, you know. So, but I always love going down for checkups every 6 months or so. And she told me some interesting things, when I was about 13 years old, I had they started doing surgery on my legs to try to strengthen them, with hopes that I'd be able to walk, and with hopes that I wouldn't break as many bones as I was breaking. Um, so they did procedures what they call rodding, uh, pins. They call them rods. I always thought of them as pins. Uh, from this size, maybe they'll be larger. The larger they got, with the more surgeries they did to try to keep your leg strong. So they would put them in the lower leg, and and my surgeries unfortunately weren't a success. And the reason is because my body would reject these rods, and they would start, literally coming out of my skin. They would have to pull them out and start all over again. So it was a pretty frustrating thing for both me and the docs, as a period of about maybe 3-4 years where they would try this stuff, and they had good intentions, but it just didn't work, So, but it was interesting because when I met with Dr. Kalish yesterday, she told me there's some new things now. They're actually starting to do rodding in people with OI in their arms. Now, my arms aren't that bad. They are a little deformed, but they are not totally deformed, and they are long. Whereas some kids now with OI, they have arms that are really, really deformed and shorter than what they should be. And so now what they're doing is they're putting the rods in the arm codes, either up here or in the forearms, to help them, just like the legs, help them to be stronger, maybe not break as easily. And apparently they're using telescopic rods now, so that as a kid grows older and grows up, the rods will grow with them. So that's pretty cool. What's nice is it's nice to hear that as technology moves on and medicine moves on, that there is more they can do for people with osteogenesis imperfecta like myself, especially for the next generation of kids coming along, who may have OI. So there's more hope out there to cope with the condition. They haven't figured out yet how to cure it, but if you can cope with it, you can make life easier. Quality of life is so important, no matter what your age. That's really key. So I'm glad to hear that they are having some breakthroughs in that vein. So I wanted to mention, first of all, I have my Oakland A's sweatshirt on, and as you probably know, if you follow sports, the A's were originally from Philadelphia, where I live outside of Philly. So it's not too far of a stretch there, but I'm wearing this shirt for a reason. First of all, the A's were from Philly, so we here in the area we still in some ways are partial to the A's. I know when I used to work in nursing homes as a social worker, a lot of people I talked to who lived back in the day, in the 20s, 30s, they fondly remember the A's and Jimmy Fox and all those old A players. We used to play at Shad Park, Baker Bowl, some of the old stadiums in Philadelphia. And so whenever we would talk about the A's, boy, it would bring back a lot of memories to some of these folks. And then the A's moved a few times. They were in Kansas City, they eventually ended up in Oakland. And what's going on out there now, I give kudos to the fan base out in Oakland. The ownership out there is trying to move the A's out of Oakland to Las Vegas. And apparently yesterday, the Nevada State Board, they approved the stadium deal out there to try to raise the money. Who's going to pay for it? The taxpayers. It looks like the A's are going to move, but everything's not set yet. They want to build a new 30,000 capacity stadium right on the Las Vegas Strip. So, but they're hoping that people who vacation in Las Vegas will take in a ball game during the summer while they're out there. I stand with the people of Oakland. They need a new stadium out there. The Oakland Coliseum has been around forever. I've never visited it, but from what I understand from reading about the stadium, talking to people who have been there, it's pretty much a dump. It's falling apart. It's probably beyond renovations at this point. It's really a football stadium. That's where the Oakland Raiders used to play. And what Oakland really needs is a new stadium. We're hoping to get a stadium like San Francisco has near the bay, near water. And there were all kinds of proposals for Oakland to get their own stadium and keep the A's. And you can't blame the fans for not going. First of all, the stadium sucks. And number two, the A's ownership is cheap. They don't remember if you don't know if you remember the old movie Moneyball starring Brad Pitt. Well, the A's ownership has always been uh, kind of frugal. They develop good players in their minor league system, and then they trade them away. They don't want to pay their stars. It's sort of a sad thing because the fans seem like a pretty loyal fan base out there, but and I'm sure they would go to the games if they, number one, had a quality facility to go to, number two, they had a quality team to watch. Now the A's happen to be on a 7-game winning streak. Hard to believe as we speak, but before that 7-game winning streak, they had one of the worst records in all of baseball, the history of baseball, up till this time of the season. They were on course to lose a record number of games. So, but what's been happening out there is the fan base is revolting, and they are hoping that ownership will sell the team to another group who will buy the A's and keep the A's in Oakland, get a new stadium, and keep the A's. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think, what I understand, this current ownership, Fisher was the guy's name, wants to move the team to Oakland, then perhaps sell the team. Team will be worth a lot more, supposedly, once they're, in Las Vegas with a new stadium. So, but you know what? Kudos to the fans in Oakland. They had a sort of a pushback revolt night last night. 37,000 people showed up in the Coliseum. The A's won their 7th game in a row. They beat the Tampa Bay Rays last night 2-1. And my hat's off to those fans there because they are really, really trying to keep their A's. I can only imagine what it'd be like if somebody said Phillies ownership were moving the Phillies out of Philadelphia to Las Vegas. I'd be pissed too, right? You would be too if you live in Los Angeles and it's the ownership was all of a sudden going to pack their bags and move the Dodgers out of town or the Yankees out of town or whatever the case is. You would be pissed too, whether you go to the games a lot or not. I'm sure there's a lot of people who maybe can't afford to go to the games or physically can't go to the games, but they watch them on TV. They're still fans, right? So anyway, I hope it all works out in Oakland for those fans. I hope the A's get to stay there, and I hope they get a new stadium. And just know that I'm a quasi Oakland A fan, and I'm rooting for all the people out there. So, I wanted to talk about one thing. I love music, as you know, and I really love British invasion music, includes the Beatles, and I love 80s music. And the 80s were a great decade for me personally. It's the decade when I started to get out in the world. I wasn't fracturing as much as I did when I was a kid. And in the 80s, I went to college and I had, I found my first girlfriend, and I was able to live a pretty independent, fracture-free life. So the 80s were one of my favorite decades to live through. And that includes the music, the TV, the movies. I just love the 80s. There's a documentary out about the 80s. It's actually about the song "We Are the World" and the making of the song "We Are the World." If you remember the song "We Are the World, We Are the People," we are the world, we are. It was written by Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie. And what they did was they wanted to raise money. They called themselves USA for Africa. And they wanted to raise money for people who were starving in Africa and through the song. And what they did was Michael Jackson, Lionel Richie wrote the song, and they said, we need a lot of celebrities, current celebrities in the 80s, to sing on this song so we could raise money. So what happened was, after the American Music Awards, 1984, they got all these people together. It was a total of 45 singers, 45 musicians, the best of the best back then, from then and before. They were strictly American singers, because what was happening in Europe or in the UK the year before, they had their own fundraiser started, really started by Bob Geldorf. I remember of the Boomtown Rats, lead singer. I Don't Like Mondays, remember that song? Well, he really got into the fundraising spirit back then. And before we talk about Live Aid, which he helped to organize, he wrote a song called Do They Know It's Christmas Time? And he got a whole bunch of British singers, musicians to sing on this track. Do they know it's Christmas time at all? And it was another fundraiser to help to raise money to feed the people in Africa, starving people in Africa, and all kinds of the British great artists, Paul McCartney, Freddie Mercury, George Michael, Roger Daltrey. They all sang on this track, and it was a great track. So they called themselves Band Aid on this track, and it was sold a lot of records. They made a lot of money. Anyway, the USA for Africa group, led by Michael Jackson, Lionel Richie, they thought they'd do the same thing for the American artists. So after the American Music Awards, which were a big deal back then, they were like kind of new back in the 80s, but they were really picking up a lot of steam. They wanted another award show to compete with the Grammys. The Grammys are voted on by disc jockeys and music inside people, but this they wanted to be the American Music Awards was voted on by the fans, as to who your favorite album is, your favorite artist of the year, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, after the American Music Awards ended, they all got together and all their limos and stuff. They went to this studio in Los Angeles, and overnight, from like 11 o'clock their time out there in California till literally until 6, 7 in the morning, they're recording the song. And the guy who produced it, led the whole thing, was Quincy Jones, the great Quincy Jones. You've heard of Quincy Jones. He did a lot of Motown stuff. He Michael Jackson on the Thriller album. It's just a iconic, legendary producer. Got all these people together. Think about it, 45 of the greatest stars back then. We're talking Bob Dylan, Paul Simon, Billy Joel, Huey Lewis, Stevie Wonder, Tina Turner, the great Tina Turner, Dionne Warwick, Cyndi Lauper, Kim Carnes, Daryl Hall, John Oates, Steve Perry, just Kenny Loggins, just so many great voices, took part in recording this record, and they did it overnight. You had the lead vocals, a lot of these people, Ray Charles. How can you beat Ray Charles, right? Recorded some solo stuff, that he blended it in with the group singing in the background. We are the world. We are. And it was just great. Well, anyway, they've got this documentary out now. You may want to look for it on YouTube uh, about the making of this record. And what's neat about it is not only do you see how they make this record step by step, which is pretty cool in itself, but you see how all of these famous people, famous music people, the thing was, Quincy Jones said, leave your egos at the door. We don't want any prima donna ego trips here. We're all going to get together for a good cause and make this record. And that's what they did. It's fascinating to watch, let's say, Billy Joel hugging Bob Dylan and singing with Bob Dylan, and Kenny Rogers singing with Paul Simon, and talking on the side between takes. And they just got along so well, and they all wanted each other's autographs. So they all had sheet music, of course, to sing their parts in the song. And everybody wanted their sheet music signed by all the other artists there. So you could just imagine having just one of those sheet music folders and having it signed by all these icons and legends. It was pretty cool. What I really liked about it was not only watching how the song was put together and different changes in the song as the night went on, but how all these artists just got along, and it's amazing. Some of the artists were just very natural about doing their parts, singing their parts, no problem. Some struggled a little bit. Bob Dylan, just couldn't seem to get his part over and over again. He tried and tried and tried. Sometimes I forget, and I'm listening to a tape or to the radio or to the CD or whatever, and say, "Wow, this guy's really brilliant. The song is so well written." It's but we forget sometimes that they have taken these artists 30, 40 takes to get it right. But the main thing is get it right, Maybe the song was changed, maybe it was crap when they started it, and they ended up with a brilliant song. It's just astounding because, to me, such great musical minds getting together, like a Ray Charles, talking to Quincy Jones or Lionel Richie or Michael Jackson, and watching how they step up to the mic and they do their parts, and there in the background you see a Michael Jackson with sunglasses on in the studio with the whole military thing on that he used to like to wear, the jacket, standing there watching everything. And so if you love the 80s, and if you love 80s music, and you want to go back in time a little bit, check out the documentary on the making of We Are the World. The 80s were a different time. You don't find that now, where these big, almost telethon kind of things, where they're making the record to make some money. And that leads us into Live Aid. Now, Live Aid was Philadelphia and London, England, Wembley Stadium. Live Aid occurred. And in Philly, it was in a stadium called JFK Stadium, which they used, if you remember, the old Army Navy games were primarily in Philadelphia back in the day. And that's JFK Stadium. And that's where we had a lot of our major concerts growing up when I was a kid. The Beatles played there. A lot of the great acts from the 70s and 80s, the Rolling Stones played there. And just an iconic place, an old place, iconic. So that's where Live Aid occurred. Now I remember the day mid-July. It was hot. It was really boiling hot that day, at least into the 90s, muggy. Um, and here in Philly, the concert started around 9 in the morning and it went until about 10 at night. Over across the pond in England, it started started a little bit earlier over there, and it was sort of overlapping. They had it coordinated that while an act was on stage in London, that an act would come on stage in Philly and vice versa, keeping the people entertained. Now here in Philly, I had like what, 100,000 people were crammed into that stadium. The concert itself, all 12, 13 hours of it was broadcast on MTV. And then I remember at night, just the nighttime part of it was broadcast on ABC. But if you wanted to watch the whole thing, MTV, which, was only in its infancy back in 1985, MTV wasn't around that long. So MTV was like the new thing, the videos, and the new music place to go. If you wanted to watch videos, you'll get the latest scoop on music. So what I remember about Live Aid was, and it'll be 38 years this July since Live Aid occurred. Beautiful hot day in the middle of summer. People in the stadium without shirts on, and there's water sprouting up everywhere, trying to cool people off. And it was just all kinds of acts, like the morning acts. Brian Adams, I remember, was there. Of course, they saved a lot of the major acts till later. At night, I remember toward the end of the concert, Mick Jagger and Tina Turner sang together. Now, the Stones, actually all the Stones were there, either in England or in Philly, but they just didn't perform together because at that time, the Stones were on the outs with each other. So Mick Jagger performed with Tina Turner, and that was really sizzling hot. They did 2 songs together. It's only rock and roll, but I like it, And they were just great. They were just great together. Hall and Oates were hot at the time, and they're a Philly act, so they were saved toward the end of the concert too. And over in England, you had Elton John and Paul McCartney. I remember one of the first acts we saw here from England, and it was like early afternoon over there, was a duo, Phil Collins and Sting performed together. What was cool about Live Aid too is you got all these duets, which you would never usually have, Sting and Phil Collins sang Every Breath You Take, and Phil Collins did a acoustic version on the piano of some of his stuff too. Just great stuff, like Dire Straits did Money for Nothing along with Sting. So just David Bowie, and of course the big iconic performance from Wembley Stadium, which the one performance that will live forever, perhaps one of the greatest 20 minutes in rock and roll history, was when Queen went on stage. It was mid-afternoon over in London, and they went on stage, and a lot of that same performance you'll see in the movie Bohemian Rhapsody. And Queen had been off the road for a while prior to 1985, and they came back with a bang and did a 20-minute set that just rocked not only Wembley Stadium, but rocked the world. And that was sort of a basis after that. The Queen went back on the road again, and their popularity was rejuvenated. But what an iconic performance, huh? The Who played. Um, it was just brilliant, brilliant stuff. Anyway, so one of the things I loved about Live Aid were the duets, and the other thing, it was so cool because in between acts, you had celebrities come from backstage and introduce the next act, like Jack Nicholson. Can you imagine Jack Nicholson coming out in between acts and saying, "Oh, now here comes Bob Dylan, isn't that?" And the crowd would go crazy, right? And at the time, Chevy Chase was a popular comedian, entertainer. I know he was sort of the MC on the Philadelphia end for a lot of the show. Jack Nicholson. It was just a lot of fun, you know. And that was the thing back in the '80s. He had these big fundraiser concerts that Farm Aid. I know a lot of people remember Farm Aid. That Willie Nelson was one of the main uh, musicians who organized Farm Aid, and John Cougar Mellencamp was always there. Um, we just don't have that anymore, you know? Why, I don't know. But it was also fascinating reading a little bit too about who didn't show up at Live Aid, who were supposed to be there, and for one reason or another backed out. Like Billy Joel was on the posters to be there, but he couldn't get his band together for one reason or another. So Huey Lewis and the News were very popular in mid 1980s. Up until 2 weeks before Live Aid, they were scheduled to perform. Something came up and they pulled out. Um, Springsteen didn't perform, although he was on We Are the World on. Oh, and then, you know, and at the end of the Philadelphia portion, think about it, over 12 hours of 13 hours of music. The final act, the final performance was We Are the World, led by the great Lionel Richie. And a lot of the performers who performed that day, who could stay in Philadelphia, came back and did We Are the World all together on stage. Just like over in England, at the end of their segment at Wembley Stadium, all of those performers came back. McCartney, Bowie, Daltrey, Queen, Freddie Mercury, George Michael. They all came back and sang together and did Do They Know It's Christmas Time? And just great stuff. So if you have a chance to watch any of these concerts like Live Aid, I know Live Aid is out on DVD. You can get the whole concert. Or even if you just find it on YouTube, just some of the segments and performers, do it. You know, it just brings back so many memories if you remember the '80s. If not, and if you want to check out some of these classic, iconic performers live, just do yourself a favor and look them up, and you'll find out great, great performers they were. And not only that, the spirit and the fellowship of the mid '80s get together and raise money, just like the Live Aid did for people who were starving in Africa. So, anyway, so that's what I wanted to talk about today. A lot to talk about. So, thanks for watching. And rainy day here in Pennsylvania, but we absolutely need the rain. So, I'm wishing you guys a great day. Have a terrific weekend coming up. Holly and I are going to a concert Friday night. Speaking of classics, we're going to see Billy Joel and Stevie Nicks live together at the lake in Philadelphia, where the Eagles play. So it should be a fun weekend, and I'm wishing you guys a great weekend too. Thanks for sharing some inspiration and some memories with me. You guys take care. Bye bye.